Hi, hello, welcome, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Cynthia if you are new here. This little fella looking out the window is Ziggy. And to be quite honest with you, I had a very different video planned for today. I planned to read off a list of books that you should read after Onyx Storm because I know that there's a good handful of you that are in a reading slump post Onyx Storm. But as someone who didn't really enjoy Onyx Storm and isn't in a reading slump because of it, I just started to think of the series as a whole, of Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and now Onyx Storm, and the fact that there are two more books. Rebecca herself, I didn't really look too much into Red Tower, but I kind of want to discuss the series as a whole, as the Empyrean versus Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, Onyx Storm, and two more books to come. Because as someone who literally got into fantasy romance because of Fourth Wing, I feel like the series is going downhill. So I will disclaim, if you love all of these books, if you love this series thus far, if you will not hear any criticism about the books, don't be afraid to click off, because I know that I'm definitely not an outlier by any means, but I'm willing to admit that I loved Fourth Wing. It meant a lot to me, and I'll explain more of that later, but I did just want to put this at the forefront that to me, this series is going downhill, and it's going downhill fast, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, so let's chat. So if you're not familiar with Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, or Onyx Storm, those are the three books that make up the Empyrean series thus far, and the author Rebecca Yarros is contracted for two more books in this series. Fourth Wing was published in May of 2023, very quickly got popular, and by November of 2023 we had the second book, Onyx Storm. We had to wait a little over a year until the end of January 2025 to get the third book, Onyx Storm. If you hear my neighbor's baby screaming, I'm sorry. She screams 24/7, so if you hear her, I'm sorry. And while I didn't love Iron Flame as much as I loved Fourth Wing, I still thought it was pretty good. There were some inconsistencies and cracks that were starting to show, but honestly, Rebecca Yarros put the book out so fast that I figured maybe she just needed more time. She had a lot of time with Onyx Storm, over double the amount of time with Onyx Storm, and it's my least favorite book of the series thus far. And that's just kind of put me into this mind space of, where is this series going? Is it going to continue to be this mess that I don't even think Rebecca knows where it's going? Or is this book just a filler and she didn't know how to fill a filler book, and so we got this, and the next two books are actually going to be a lot better? I don't know. These are unfortunately questions that don't have answers yet, because we're just gonna have to wait and find out. Let's chat a little bit about Rebecca herself and then get into the books. So a quick little tidbit about Rebecca Yarros, and I will quickly disclaim I didn't look into Red Tower Publishing. I probably should have. Don't be surprised if Editing Cynthia pops up next to give you some facts about Red Tower Publishing if there's anything interesting about them. But Rebecca Yarros is a military wife. She lives in Colorado, and she is a mother of 6. I believe 2 of her children are disabled, so I understand a little bit more about why she wrote Violet with her disability rep. And before she wrote Fourth Wing, she wrote, I want to say, about 20 contemporary romance novels. So Rebecca is not a newbie at writing romance. I think she knows what she's doing there. But the fantasy aspect is definitely a new one for Rebecca. And interestingly enough, after Fourth Wing came out, it sat on the New York Times bestseller list for I think 65 weeks, which is a very long time. So that kind of goes to show you that Fourth Wing really made an impact on its readers. And I also think it kind of proved to Rebecca that she could branch out into still romance, but with a different genre, and it worked, because it did. Fourth Wing works. It's not a literary masterpiece, but it works. So let me explain why it works. Also, just a side note before I jump in, because that would have been such a good transition, I have not read any of Rebecca's other contemporary romance novels. I am only talking about the Empyrean series because that's the only body of Rebecca Yarros' work that I have read. Okay, hi, not editing Cynthia, but I did do a quick little Google of Red Tower Books, and it looks like Red Tower Books is an imprint of Entangled Publishing, and based on this Reddit post that I found, they don't have too many books. They do seem to be very romantic-y, fantasy romance based. And according to this post, some of the books are pretty good, but there were people who read quite a few of the books who kind of everyone agreed that Red Tower really needs to hire some editors for their books. And I completely understand that sentiment because I don't know who's editing Rebecca Yarros's books, but they need an assistant, or they need to be replaced, or they just need another pair of eyes to look at her books. And I said what I said. I'm not going to apologize for that one, because if I'm going to spend $35 on a special edition, it should be edited appropriately. From one of the comments in this Reddit post, someone says that Red Tower has great marketing and very pretty books, but the substance needs work, especially if it's marketing towards adults. It almost feels juvenile or rushed, quick. Romantasy is very popular, and if you can push out a few quickly so no one catches on to the fact that these are YA and poorly edited, then you can kind of just get away with it, essentially. So, and that's not anything against Red Tower, but it does make sense because it seems like they've taken, Rebecca Yarros under their wing because they saw all the money that they could make with Fourth Wing and a subsequent series off of it, instead of putting in the work to make sure that the stories make sense and the books are edited and that people are actually getting their money's worth when they go out to these stores at 4 a.m. to buy special editions. It seems like they just don't care because they just want to make their money. And maybe they don't care is too strong of a statement. Maybe they do care, they just don't care enough. But I'm not really interested in any of the other books that are published by Red Tower. Although I do kind of want to read 5 Broken Blades, so might read a couple of other Red Tower books. But to be quite honest with you, just seeing this tier ranking that they did and how detailed they were in talking about each book, I'm very hesitant to pick up any other books by Red Tower because, I don't know. I know Romantasy is popular, and I know that you can get readers for it. Why you gotta do readers dirty like that? So, if I do read Red Tower books, I will be borrowing them from the library. But I just wanted to interject with that back to wherever I was in this video. So on the off chance you're not familiar with Fourth Wing centers around our main character, Violet Sorrengail. She physically is very frail and weak, and she's ready to enter the scribe quadrant. Her brain, her memory, is her biggest and strongest muscle in her arsenal, and so she really just wants to play to her strengths. But instead, she ends up going for the Writer's Quadrant, and the Writer's Quadrant is pretty much what it sounds like. They're dragon riders. If they are successful, they will bond with a dragon, and they will become dragon riders. And the dragon riders are kind of and keep in mind that this is a war college, so the dragon riders are pretty much military. But in terms of quadrants, there's a scribe quadrant. This is going to drive me nuts. There's the scribe quadrant, which is the brainy kids. There's the Writer's Quadrant, which is all the dragon riders, the tough guys. And then there is the Healer's Quadrant, which is all the doctors and nurses and medicine. Doesn't really go beyond those 3. And essentially, everyone is pretty much like, Violet, what are you doing? You can't be a dragon rider. You're tiny and frail. How are you going to stay on a dragon? And, spoiler, homegirl can't stay on a dragon. Violet really struggles, but she makes it through. She survives. She's able to overcome her physical challenges in order to become a stronger and better dragon rider. She also develops a very close-knit group of friends in Liam, Sawyer, Rydok, and Rhiannon. If I miss someone, please let me know in the comments. And she also develops an enemies to lovers sort of romance with Xaden Ryerson. I'm sure you've heard Xaden's name all over the internet, even if you have not read this book. But her and Xaden enter into this enemies to lovers trope, and I actually think my favorite part of their relationship was in Fourth Wing. I actually really enjoyed the romance in Fourth Wing, I'm not gonna lie. They're also a smut, and I don't think that this book should be considered young adult because it's definitely more new adult. But essentially, the TLDR of it is our main character, Violet, is weak. She's going to be a scribe, changes her mind, she becomes a dragon rider. There you go, Fourth Wing. So like I said at the beginning of this video, Fourth Wing is the book that initially got me into the fantasy romance genre. I read probably what would be considered early fantasy romance in, the 2010s era fantasy romance of Twilight, Divergent, The Hunger Games, all that stuff, where there's a main genre within fantasy, dystopian, sci-fi, and then there's a romance subplot, and I ate all that stuff up. Harry Potter, come on, I'm a millennial. And then most other people who found fantasy romance later, there were a few years there where I wasn't reading as much, or I was reading a lot of like mysteries, thrillers. I even got into a little bit of horror there. I went through like a classics phase where I was reading all the classics again. That was kind of fun actually. And then I went to school and I was reading so much academically because I have a BA in English that I really wasn't reading for myself. When I picked up Fourth Wayne, I didn't really have high expectations. I just thought it sounded interesting and everyone was talking about it and I wanted to be in on it. The rest is history. And like I also said, Fourth Wayne is not some literary masterpiece. I'm not the biggest fan of Rebecca Yarros' writing. Her romance can also be a little cringy at times, if I'm being honest, but something I really liked about Fourth Wayne was that I really liked the setup. It kind of reminds me of Blood and Steel, where you know that there are more books, and so the first book just does a really, really good job of setting up the story for the rest of the series, and that was something I found that I really enjoyed. I also really liked the dynamic with the characters. I like how a lot of them seemed a little bit more fleshed out. I also really enjoyed the friendships that Violet does develop. I like that the stakes weren't like super high, but like they were still there and I appreciated that. There's also a ton of action in Fourth Wayne and I think that's what I liked the most. I liked that as soon as I got swept into the story, it was like a train on a track and it was just going and it could not be stopped. And honestly, it was so fun. I loved the action, the adventure, the setup, the romance, like all of it just for me worked so perfectly. Like the vibes were vibing. I hate saying that, but it's the best way to describe why so many people were so obsessed with Fourth Wayne. Because, I mean, if you think about it, it's the perfect storm. You have people who haven't read in a long time looking to get back into reading. You have people who love fantasy and romance, and now you've put them both together. You have people who maybe are just curious. You have, younger people who haven't read a lot of novels like this. And so you just create the perfect fan base of people to become obsessed. And I was part of that. And like I said, it's not perfect. I'm not a fan of the writing. The romance was a little cringy. The plot holes were small, but they were there. And overall, there are things that are wrong with it. But if you don't think too hard about it, if you just enjoy it for what it is, it's a fantastic book. And that's why I gave Fourth Wayne 5 out of 5 stars. Like 5 stars out of 5 stars. Hands down, loved Fourth Wayne. It was my absolute favorite read of 2023. And I read ACOTAR that year too. So that says something. I mean, Mist and Fury was on its tail. But I genuinely had such a fun time reading Fourth Wayne. So about 6 months after Fourth Wayne, Rebecca Yarros blesses us with Iron Flame. And I'm excited. I'm going to call out a work to read this book level excited. So in case you're not familiar with Iron Flame, here is a messy summary because it's really hard to summarize these books. But Iron Flame picks up where Fourth Wayne left off, and we are now entering Violet's second year at the War College. But not everything is as it seems, and if Violet thought getting through her first year was rough, surviving her second year when they're on the brink of war is going to make things a little harder. She's also still in a relationship with Xaden, but they're not really communicating in this book. It's very frustrating. We do get to see other characters and their signets as well as their dragons' powers. And it's all very kind of interesting. It was a very long book. I believe it was about 600 pages, similar to Onyx Storm. And I guess the TLDR of it would be that now Violet's in her second year. She's not really communicating with Xaden. He's got secrets. And while we start at the War College in the beginning of the book, by the end of the book, we have left the War College because there is a revolution. And for some reason, War College students are the solution. If I'm being honest, I thought that I didn't like Iron Flame after I read it, but the truth is that I did like Iron Flame because that's how much I dislike Onyx Storm. To be honest, in my opinion, I think Iron Flame had a lot of potential. I just think it was a little messy and a little all over the place. To be honest, I think the biggest letdown is the world building. We're now out of the War College. I don't know how to pronounce it, and I ain't even gonna try, please. But we've essentially left the War College, and we've gone to Xaden's family home. I'm still so confused about all the places and all the people and the politics. I'm still so confused. I really need Rebecca to just spell it out. You know how some books, what was that one book? When the Moon Hatched? I DNF'd that one. Don't get excited that I read it. But you know how that book, if you read it, has that giant glossary at the beginning of it. Rebecca needs to give us one of those for the characters and the places and the signets and the dragons, because it's so much. It's way too much. But I think my biggest gripe with this book, aside from the whole miscommunication with Violet and Xaden, is the fact that every chapter reads like it's an episode of a show. Like every single chapter had that like fade to black kind of effect. And it was honestly really annoying. Like if Rebecca had done it for a few chapters, I would have been like, all right, whatever. But the fact that she did it for every single chapter in this book just kind of drove me nuts. And like I said, because now we've left the War College, there was just like so much info dumping. There were so many new characters that I feel like Rebecca either didn't have the time to like flesh out and put thought into, or she just didn't care to. I honestly don't know. But it was very annoying, to be quite honest with you. And Xaden was also very secretive in this book, which kind of goes back a little bit to the whole him and Violet not communicating as ideally, I guess, in this book. There was a lot of miscommunication, there was a lot of lack of communication, and it sometimes felt like it was just Violet whining for like 600 pages. Who wants to read that? Did you hear that? Silence. Because no one wants to read that. But it was just very frustrating. The ending ripped my heart out. That was a rough ending. That was a very rough ending. I think if anything, you're lucky that Onyx Storm is out now, because then you can just jump into the next one. Having to wait over a year for the next one was not fun. Not fun. But overall, I wasn't as impressed as I was with Fourth Wing. Like, again, these books aren't, like, literary masterpieces. I don't think they're going to end up as classics and our grandchildren are going to be like, oh, we're reading Rebecca Yarros in school. I mean, that would be interesting if they did. But like I said, I just wasn't as impressed with Iron Flame as I was with Fourth Wing. It felt a little messy. It felt a little all over the place. You know, the chapters with every single one being fade to black was a little jarring. And there's also a lot of like repetitiveness. The dragons were great in this book. I loved them in Iron Flame as much as I did Fourth Wing. So I don't really have any complaints there, but it was just like all the miscommunication, all the lack of communication, all of the info dumping. Like, I think Iron Flame is where you can really start to see all those like cracks and imperfections within Rebecca's, like, I guess, storytelling and writing and just kind of her as an author. So Iron Flame does get 3 stars out of 5 stars. I didn't like it as much as Fourth Wing, but in hindsight, it wasn't as bad as Onyx Storm. So let's move right along. All right, so in Onyx Storm, we don't pick up directly where Iron Flame left off, but I don't even know how to describe this book to you. But essentially, we're still outside of the War College. We have left the college. We are no longer in the college. They're still trying to set up classes, though, because Violet is still technically in her 2nd year, getting ready to enter her 3rd year, which I don't know how she's going to do that when they're also fighting a war. So there's that. But essentially, Violet discovers that Andarna, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so just keep that in mind. But Andarna is essentially the 7th breed of dragon, and so in an effort to, pretty much end the war then and there, Violet sets out with her quest squad, which I'm sure you've seen online, Rhydock's Broken JBL, to essentially find the 7th breed of dragons and bring them back to Navarre to help them in the war. That's kind of the main plot that's going on in this book. There are a few other subplots. There's a kitten named Broccoli, which, Rebecca, you better be careful there. You better tread lightly with Broccoli. And I say that on behalf of the whole fandom. I think I'm allowed to say that on behalf of everyone in this fandom. Violet and Xaden are actually communicating a lot better in this one. There was a very, very, sad undertone to this book with Xaden, which I will touch on in a moment. But it's really hard to, summarize this book because it's messy. It's so messy. It's so all over the place. A lot of people kind of gave it a pass from what I've read online because this book was meant to be a filler book. But let's just get into my thoughts. In terms of my thoughts on Onyx Storm, the plot is truly all over the place. Rebecca starts a plot and then she drops it and starts another plot, and that's such a recurring theme in this book. Is Rebecca literally starting things and just not finishing them. And on top of that, I, at some point, gave up trying to figure out everything because she dropped so many names, places, information. I was overwhelmed at the amount of information that was just like thrown on us. And I was like, wait, who is this? And then there was like, it was like Llewellyn or something, but like, that's a character and a place. And I was just like, you know what? We're just going to go with it because I'm never going to finish this book if I keep trying to figure everything out before I continue reading. And unlike Iron Flame, where every chapter was like a fade to black at the end, Onyx Storm, in terms of like pacing, felt like a kiddie roller coaster. Like there was no traditional introduction, problem, climax, resolution. Instead, it was just like all these like miniature emotional gut punches and dramatization of things just for the sake of dramatizing things. Like things that really didn't need to be dramatized were, and I think it was just for the sake of making it feel like, one, there was a lot going on, and two, to keep us like entertained, because Onyx Storm was long too. Similar to Iron Flame, it was I think about 600 pages, and that's a lot to fill. And so it seemed like a lot of what Rebecca was doing in Onyx Storm was filling, and that was... But I think by far the biggest like disappointment in Onyx Storm was the characters and the dragons not even feeling like themselves. Xaden and Violet are just possessive, and Xaden is just like, I'm gonna marry Violet. And there's not really much else to him, which is really annoying considering what's going on with him. I swear to God, you could make a drinking game out of all the times Violet says mine in relation to Xaden. Like you'd be hammered by the end of the book. Let me tell you, okay? But more than that, what happened to the dragons? What happened to Tarn? What happened to Andarna? But what happened to them? Like their personalities, what happened to them? Between Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, they seemed pretty consistent, and I really enjoyed them in the book. I think if anything, I like the dragons more than I like the main characters. But then we get to Onyx Storm, and I'm just like, what is going on? And even like the romance, like it just felt so flat. It also just felt like Rebecca didn't know what to do with Violet and Xaden at this point. And so even though they're communicating, I will give Rebecca credit for that, because after Iron Flame, I was like, bro, if they don't talk to each other, I'm not reading it. But they do talk to each other, and it's very nice to see them communicating. But I just, ugh. And then the end of the book, again, with the cliffhangers, like I get it. I get it. Cliffhangers are what keep people interested. They're what keep readers hooked until the end of the series. I get it. I get why authors use it. But my God, this one was by far the worst cliffhanger of the whole freaking series. Like, it was rushed. I had to reread it like 3 times just to like understand what the heck was happening, because I had no idea. And it was just... I don't understand how everyone loved this book. Like, am I crazy? I feel like a crazy person because I just see all the inconsistencies and the plot holes and the messiness and even the characters not feeling like the characters we met in Fourth Wing. And I'm just like, who are these people? I don't know them. And I know they've been through a lot, and I know that characters will change through a series, especially as they go through things. But I just feel like these characters just keep regressing. They're not developing with each book. I feel like they're just regressing into these like weird emotional states, and I'm just like, I'm not here for it. I don't like it. Like, I just found myself rolling my eyes so often. I'm surprised they didn't pop out of my skull at one point while I was reading this insufferable book, because Onyx Storm gets 2 stars out of 5 stars, and trust me, that is generous, okay? The 2 stars, let me put it this way. Rydok's sarcasm, Mira's attitude, and little Tabby Cat Broccoli are the redeeming and the only redeeming factors for me of this book. And so for those 3, 2 stars out of 5 stars. I do want to take a second to apologize if I'm being a little harsh. It's not my intention to sit here and trash this book for however long this video ends up being. That's not my intention. I just want to point out the fact that this series could be a lot better. And instead of getting better, it's getting worse. And it's really disappointing, because this series is truly just starting to feel like a cash grab. Like, all of the special editions, it's just money. It's just a cash grab. And the fact that people were getting up at absurd hours in the morning to go to stores to buy special editions of this book, to me, what was a flop, I would have returned my copy. I genuinely would have returned my copy. If I had gotten up at 4 a.m. to stand in line outside of a Target for a special edition, which had art, which by the way, was licensed from D&D, not even original, to the Empyrean series, I would have returned it. Because what an insult. What an insult to everyone who loves this series, to support the author, to support the publishers, to support the story, and then you can't even give us original artwork. And I'm watching these interviews of Rebecca and she's so sassy and like she's living her best life, and like it just pisses me off because I'm not living my best life reading these books. I'm agitated. I'm annoyed because what is this? Anyway, I had to take a second. I was getting angry. Like I was saying, this series just feels like it's so capitalistic. It doesn't feel like Rebecca is writing this story to really please the readers. It feels like she's writing this story how she wants, and she should. She is the author. This is her story to tell. But what I don't like is that you're out here selling all these special editions, being all like funny and sarcastic in interviews. The book was garbage. I don't really have a leg to stand on because I did buy a physical copy of the book. I do have the sprayed edges. I wasn't intending to buy any of the special copies, but I had stopped by the bookstore and they had just like a table full of them with the sprayed edges. So I was like, you know what? I'll just get the sprayed edges. It's fine. I was completely happy with a plain standard copy, no sprayed edges. This series just feels like they're pumping out the books for money. Like, I'm so happy that Rebecca has found success. I'm so happy that her trying out writing a different genre and a different style even worked out for her, because Fourth Wing blew the heck up. Like, Fourth Wing, crazy. I mean, 65 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. That is crazy. Okay, that is crazy. And I do believe that Rebecca Yarros could be the next Sarah J. Maas, but I don't think she has the ability to grasp that potential. There was actually a review I saw on Goodreads of Onyx Storm, and I'll put a screenshot if I find it. And it was like, the potential is chasing Rebecca, but she's too fast. And I just feel like it's a little mean. But it's true. Like, Rebecca, I think I kind of wish that this series maybe hadn't introduced the war so soon. Because to be honest, like, where do I think the series is going? I have a few ideas. Like with Xaden, I have no idea. After the ending of Onyx Storm, like, I have no idea how he's coming back from that. And Rebecca hasn't really given us too much information on how he could come back from that. So I have no idea with that. But I mean, obviously they're going to come out of all of this, you know, with whatever they come out of this with. We are definitely going to lose another main character. Rebecca likes to kill off her characters. I mean, sorry, someone just screamed in the parking lot. But we know that Rebecca likes to kill off her, you know, her characters, and so we're definitely going to lose someone else. I'm preparing myself for that moment. I do think that Violet and Xaden are endgame, but in terms of like the series as a whole, I ain't got no idea, especially after Onyx Storm, because I've seen posts online from Rebecca where she talks about how she has the next two books like plotted out, and I'm like, do you really? Do you really? Can I see, just for like proof, for evidence? Can I see the receipts? Because I don't believe you. But to be honest, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts, but at the same time, I feel like I have no thoughts. All I know is that I loved Fourth Wing. I literally owe Fourth Wing as the reason for me even getting into fantasy romance, because it wasn't ACOTAR. It wasn't Sarah J. Maas. It was Fourth Wing. Okay, and so I have to give credit where it's due. But to me, the series has just gone so far downhill, I don't even know how Rebecca can redeem herself. I also don't know if I'm going to be finishing the series, because to be quite honest with you, I'm very disappointed with how the series is going. I want to see how everything ends. I don't know if I'm willing to spend the time and the money anymore investing in the books and whatever to see how it gets there. And I do think that future copies, if I do read them, will probably be borrowed from the library, because I can't support this like capitalistic cash grab that they're pulling with these later books. I just find it so gross, to be quite honest with you. I would honestly love to know your thoughts, because like I said, I'm definitely not the outlier. I know that other people have not liked these books or this series, or they liked one but they didn't like another. I've seen reviews online. I want to know your thoughts. What do you think of the series? Do you love the series? Do you hate the series? Have you never even read the series, but you were just curious about what I had to say about the series? And if you did love the series, are you going to continue the series? Do you also think that it's kind of going on a downhill trajectory, or do you think that Rebecca Yarros is out here girl bossing, doing her thing, and she's doing it right, all in all. I'm sorry if this came off a little bit messy and all over the place. It was very hard to organize some of my thoughts at some point with some of these books. There's also so much that's gone on in these 3 books that even just trying to summarize them, I just felt like so overwhelmed because there's so much that happens and so much that goes on. And so if you've made it to this point, thank you for sticking with me. I would definitely love to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to leave it here because I don't want to keep ranting and I don't want to keep talking to talk. So as always, thank you so much for watching and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.